Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Baldur's Gate 3 Level 3 Spell Report Cards. Today we are going to cover a couple damaging spells that can provide value over many turns with Spirit Guardians and Call Lightning. After the video, you can vote on what tier you think these spells should be in the polls in the description. Let's start with Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians call forth spirits to protect you. Nearby enemies take 3d8 radiant or necrotic damage per turn, and their movement speed is halved. The caster cannot become invisible when concentrating on this spell. This costs your action, your spell slot, and your concentration to cast, and it deals damage in a 10-foot radius around the caster, with a wisdom save to cut the damage in half. When you upcast, you deal an additional 1d8 damage. This is learned by clerics, war domain clerics, via magical secrets, and crowned paladins. So as we saw, Spirit Guardians is a damaging spell that deals 3d8 radiant damage. This is 13.5 on average, which is very low for a level 3 spell. The damage type of radiant is strong, but that's not enough to save the weak numbers. It also has a wisdom save associated with it to cut the damage in half, which is a mediocre but okay save type. And even more, for this low damage, the spell costs your concentration to cast and your movement. Very few damaging spells need your movement to be effective. You can just cast them on a point and deal your damage, but Spirit Guardians does, and that is very unique. This spell will cost you pretty much all of your movement every turn, and your concentration, and even some of your actions and bonus actions for more movement to be effective. But if you do commit all of this, this spell can and will hit every enemy in the encounter. It is not limited by any kind of range, just your movement. And if you invest into movement, it can get very, very high. This makes the spell good at two things. Even though it has low damage, if you can hit a lot of enemies, then this spell is very good for wasting low HP enemies. Spirit Guardians is the king of AoE spells in this sense. At level 5, when you unlock it, and in most of Act 2, when some enemies are weak to radiant damage, this spell will just burn through those horde-type encounters very quickly and very easily. This might be the only resource you need to use in those fights. The other use, and the one that makes the spell so good, because being a horde killer is nice, but not enough to be a top-tier spell, the spell has insane item synergies, and it is the number one spell for applying conditions. You can see a list of a few of the examples in the bottom right. Radiating Orb, specifically with the Luminous Armor, is overpowered, and it's so easy to use. You cast Spirit Guardians, you run around, and enemies will have a -10 if you stack it up all the way to hit on their attack rolls. This will protect your entire party. A Spirit Guardians plus Luminous Armor Cleric can solo many encounters, especially in Act 2. It also can use the Reverberation gear very well. The Ring of Mental Inhibition exists as a choice to get mental fatigue, and of course, any speed boosting gear will pair very well with Spirit Guardians. Last thing before we move on to the grades, Spirit Guardians is strong enough to win encounters on its own with one cast, but should you be so inclined, you really want to kill enemies as quick as you can damage people multiple times with this spell. Typically, enemies can only be hit once. But if you cast Spirit Guardians, run around and damage the enemies, end concentration, and cast it again, you can hit enemies again on the same turn. This is sometimes overkill, and it will cost a lot of movement, but it is there as an option. Grades. I love this spell. I have an S for every point in the game. Act 1 and 2 should be fairly obvious. The damage is good enough for Act 1, the conditions are always strong, and in Act 2, many enemies are weak to it. It is true that in Act 3, the damage falls off, and it doesn't even start as high damage, so you might think the late game grade should be lower. But the key to this spell is the conditions. Be it your first encounter at level 5 or in High Hall, this spell will get that job done better than anything else. Upcasting is a C. 1d8 upcasting on damage is really not higher than a D in my opinion, but despite the low damage increase, I upcast the spell a lot. That's because it will get its job done regardless of level, and the damage can be significant when you're hitting so many targets. The middle section is all S's except for price. I think this spell is well worth the high cost, but it demands your concentration, your movement, and often other actions or bonus actions for more movement to effectively use. I touched on the items a bit already. I will say you can really go anywhere from just the Luminous Armor to a full on Spirit Guardians build, and your character is going to be very strong. You can load up with Radiating Orb and Reverberation and just run around the whole battlefield and cripple enemies, or you can just simply use one piece of gear and kind of build a multifaceted cleric, and it will still be very good. Overall, this spell is clearly S tier in my mind. It is so strong that it elevates the cleric class as a whole. Bards can take this with magical secrets. Not many spells can say that. It's just really damn good, and on top of that, it also feels really good to use. Alright, next up, let's cover Call Lightning. Call Lightning. Lightning strikes all targets within the area of effect for 3d10 lightning damage. Then, for 10 turns, you can call down lightning again without expending a spell slot. This costs your action, your spell slot, and your concentration to cast. It has a range of 60 feet and an AoE of 7 feet, and it has a dex save to cut the damage in half. On upcast, it deals an additional 1d10 damage on both the initial cast and the recast. This is learned by Druids, Tempest Clerics, Land Druids, Tome Warlocks, Storm Sorcerers, and via Magical Secrets. Call Lightning has a touch more damage than the previous spell at 3d10 lightning damage, which is 16.5 on average. It also calls for a dexterity save to have the damage, which is suboptimal, but as lightning damage, it can be doubled with the wet condition, which brings its potential damage up much higher than you would expect. Now, 3d10, even with lightning damage, doesn't sound like a lot for a level 3 spell, so let's take a quick look at how this stacks up to the other damaging options you have at this level. Alright, so here we have a list of spells levels 1 through 3 and their average damage. This is a pretty simple way of looking at spells. There's obviously a lot more to look at, but this is just a easy way to look at how much damage a spell does. You're going to want to look in column E here in the middle. This is the spell's damage at level 3. Towards the top, we have Moonbeam and Cloud of Daggers. This is because I've counted for them hitting twice, because they almost always will activate on cast and the start of a turn. We have right below it the classic AoE damaging options at level 3 of Fireball and Lightning Bolt. We've got Scorching Ray and Upcasted Inflict Wounds. And we need to scroll down a fair bit to get to Call Lightning. We are passing a lot of upcasted level 1 spells. You can see Witch Bolt here has 19.5 average damage, and that is also a lightning spell that you can recast. It has a lot of other bad things going for it, though, so I don't mean to imply that Witch Bolt is better. We have Magic Missile here, which is guaranteed damage, and here we are, Call Lightning at 16.5. We are on par with Hail of Thorns, and we are really below a lot of spells that provide a lot more. Call Lightning really is a damaging spell. You can recast it, which is a little unique, but a lot of these spells above it have some other effect that make them strong as well. So we can see just in terms of average damage, it's really falling behind. So, Call Lightning, it's low on damage, it has a mediocre AoE, and it has a weak save type. So it really has a bunch of weak damaging properties, but it's actually not a terrible choice for you to cast. It's really a trade-off. You're giving up a fair amount of damage for the ability to recast on subsequent turns with no spell slot cost. So yes, 3d10 is low, but 3d10 multiple times, potentially doubled with a wet condition, that can be appealing. As with all spells that you can recast, you do need to be aware of your spellcasting modifier changing if you multiclass. The recast will use the spellcasting modifier of your most recent acquisition instead of the base class, so keep that in mind when you're ordering your level ups for multi-class builds. To cast this spell, it does cost your concentration, and you need to keep it up to recast it. This is fair, it makes sense that you need to concentrate to recast a spell, but it is a bit more limiting than other pure damage options, and its direct competitor of Lightning Bolt, which does not cost concentration. That's most of what I wanted to say about the spell on its own. But there is one more thing we want to point out. This is specifically a good spell for Tempest Clerics and Storm Sorcerers. Tempest Clerics don't naturally get Lightning Bolt, so if you're not multiclassed, this is just a good lightning damage option for them. Storm Sorcerers, as well, can gain their bonus action flight each turn using the Call Lightning recast, so it doubles as a good mobility option for them mid-fight. Alright, let's get into the grades. This spell is, in my opinion, fairly middle of the road, and the grades reflect that. Its mediocrity is saved by lightning damage, and the recast gives it a differentiator from direct comparisons. I have an A for early game and C for mid to late. The damage falls off fast on this one, and many of the shadow enemies in Act 2 will resist lightning. Upcasting is a B. I don't really love upcasting any damage spells, but I think it affecting the recast as well makes the idea much better in my mind, and there are maybe a few times I would upcast this as a Tempest Cleric, for example. For the middle section, I have a B for superiority. This is the most broad category of how good is a spell, how does it compare to other spells, and I think it's just fine. Versatility and uniqueness get A's. The recasting sets it apart and allows it to be thrown out as a more versatile, I want to damage some things option than a more targeted spell. Price is a C. Concentration on a damaging spell is a big cost. Only the best of the best can easily get away with that, and Call Lightning just isn't quite up there. Overall, I will be giving Call Lightning a B grade. Alright, let's put these into the tier list. I have Spirit Guardians at the top of S so far. Mass Healing Word is on the brink of A, and Sleet Storm is solid, but not as encounter winning as a strong Spirit Guardians in my opinion. Spirit Guardians probably won't end up at the very top because of its item dependency, but it is going to be a high S tier spell. Call Lightning falls at the bottom of B so far. It's just so fine. I think Hypnotic Pattern and Plant Growth feel more impactful, and with the lower damage in AoE, Call Lightning loses the direct comparison to Fireball in my mind. Alright, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a good one. Thanks for watching.